What's going on, guys? It's Scott here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. Today I have a brand new Fallout 4 build to share with you all, and this guy is a machine of destruction. He can give the nuclear explosions of the Great War a run for their money. This is the pilot, our airborne bomber build. The pilot's passion for flight transformed him into the US Army's ultimate killing machine. While soldiers fought tooth and nail in the dirt, the pilot soared above, raining devastation on anybody who challenged freedom. And now that the world has gone to ruin, the pilot has commandeered a suit of power armor instead of a fighter jet. From the safety of his armor, he seeks out the vantage point over his enemies, and with an explosive submachine gun, a gigantic fat man, and a seemingly endless supply of grenades, he recreates the Great War of 2077 for his enemies. When he loots the battlefield, he does so wading through the ashes of whatever once stood there. And one more thing, in his bomber jacket and flight helmet, no one suits the aesthetic of the Pridwen better than him. Whether you're in or out of your armor, the pilot will be turning heads. Before we get started, don't forget the timestamps can be found in the description to help you find your way throughout the video. But with that said, let's get right into the build, starting with the pilot's backstory and basic values. The pilot was born in rural Massachusetts and grew up as an only child a few hours' drive from Boston. From a very young age, the pilot was fascinated by planes. When playing in the fields around their homestead, he would often stop in his tracks when an aircraft flew overhead. He'd gaze to the skies in awe and listen to the rumbling of human ingenuity whirring inside the distant engines. When the aircraft had soared out of sight, he would stretch out his arms and announce his takeoff before charging through the shin-high grass. His father was a retired engineer. He had a gazillion stories on his time working as a consultant for big companies. He designed robots and vehicles and even army-grade aircrafts. In fact, he had a project he'd been working on for years under a dusty tarp in the garage. The pilot wasn't allowed to peek under the sheet, but his father promised that one day he could help with the project. One seemingly uneventful day, the pilot accompanied his mother to the nearest super-duper mart, some 50 miles from home. While she sorted through the aisles, choosing their suppers for the coming week, the pilot ventured to the children's aisle, where toys were stacked among the shelves, just waiting to be plucked down by excitable kids. Perched majestically on the top shelf, he saw a model plane with what seemed to be a spinnable propeller and a star-spangled banner sprawled across the ginormous wingspan. He climbed the rows of shelves, too eager to even consider asking a clerk for help, and when he had the plane in his grasp, he ran back to his mother and begged for her to buy it for him. She obliged, and on the way out, his excitement compounded when he saw a man stapling posters to the post in the parking lot. The words "County Fair" were written across the top of the poster, and the picture showed a boy no older than him flying a real-life plane, dropping candy like parachuting soldiers or atom bombs out of the cockpit. It was only 1 week away, and the days seemed to pass in slow motion as he stewed in anticipation. When the pilot and his parents arrived at the fair, there was an assault on the senses. The sound of delighted cries from children mingled with the guttural screams from adults flying by on roller coasters. The aromas of sickly sweet cotton candy, buttery popcorn, and the mess of barnyard animals coalesced into a foul yet tantalizing concoction. And through the maze of human bodies, the pilot navigated his way to the plane, dragging his parents along by the hands. A man stood beside the runway in the old-fashioned pilot's gear and bellowed to the crowd that he needed a young volunteer. The pilot thrust his arm into the air and began jumping frantically on the spot. It was his lucky day as the man chose him. That day, the pilot climbed into the cockpit of a real plane, and he flew above the fair in the passenger seat. The man instructed him to drop candy bars from the window, ensuring that the miniature parachutes were not tangled, so that they could float safely down onto the crowd. The pilot did as he was told, though in his mind the scene looked nothing like reality. He was flying in his daydream, not in the passenger seat. The crowd of smiling, waving fairgoers were in fact zombies, and these were not candy bars, but bombs. From that day onward, the pilot knew exactly what he would be writing down in class when the teacher asked what he wanted to be when he grew up. During his adolescence, the pilot worked afternoons in the local greengrocer. On the weekends, he helped his father with his secret project, a robotic plane that would one day fly without a pilot, requiring nothing more than a remote control. And when he wasn't at school or doing any of these things, he was spending his hard-earned money on private flying lessons. After finishing education and spending 1 year at university, the pilot decided to join the United States Army Air Corps. Many of the new recruits had taken flying lessons like him, but in boot camp, no one came close to the pilot. He stood out for his brilliance in the air, and his reputation soon preceded him, granting him the respect of superior officers. During his time training near Boston, he stumbled upon the love of his life in the most mundane of places, Nora worked as a clerk at the local general store to help her make a dent in her student loans while studying law. The two soon fell in love and were married quietly in a local church, without the presence of family and without even informing his officers. He spent whatever time he had away from the military with her, but soon after she became pregnant, the pilot was sent to China as part of a bombardment squadron. They were a long way from action, but they would play a significant role in the Yangtze campaign and the US revenge. The pilot was soon promoted to lead bombing runs over China during the campaign. Following the Yangtze River, the pilot's bombing runs saw countless Chinese supply lines in annexed nations destroyed. This severed the limbs of the Chinese army reaching out from Shanghai and Nanjing. He saw many outposts filled with communist fighters go up in flames in his rearview mirror, and he even led the charge over the cities of Shanghai and Nanjing before the American forces took control of the major cities. He had witnessed what seemed like a sure victory for the US, and he was permitted to retire with honors and go and witness the birth of his child. When he did so, he was certain that the war would soon be over, with America declared the winner. And while he enjoyed several months with his wife and young child in sanctuary, he was soon proven wrong, as when the war came to an end, there was no winner, only total atomic annihilation. The pilot will be devastated by the loss of his family, but as a veteran and a professional killer, he will control his overwhelming emotions, putting his anger to a productive use in finding his son. But when he finds Sean and sees what he has become, he will be disappointed. He was stripped of the opportunity to raise his son. He had grand plans of building planes and county fairs, but instead his son lurked underground, lacking any noticeable compassion. In the wasteland, the pilot will act like a military man, doing what he can to serve the good people of the Commonwealth, but being a military man means being able to shut down his conscience when an important job needs to be done. He considers himself honourable despite the countless numbers of lives he has taken over the years. That requires a serious level of discipline. The Brotherhood of Steel will resemble the best aspects of the pilot's past. They aren't identical to the US Armed Forces, but they understand the importance of military structure, and he can easily see himself aligning with their goals and motives. Also, when the pilot catches a glimpse of the Prydwen, he will immediately be awestruck. His childhood fascination brought to life in glorious fashion. At that moment, his loyalty will be clear. Despite his morals telling him to show mercy on Sean and the Institute, he sees that there is no choice but to finish them. The pilot will always be eager to take to the skies, whether in a vertibird, the Prydwen, or using a jetpack modification on his specially designed power armor. His father would have been proud to see the majestic suit of armor he'd created after the world had gone to ruin. The pilot will also neutralize the Nuka World Raiders, seeing them for the foul infestation that they are. At the start of the game, the pilot's special stats will be 3 strength, 1 perception, 10 endurance, 1 charisma, 10 intelligence, 1 agility, and 1 luck. The special book in Sean's room will go into agility in order to get the commando perk as early as possible. His endurance and intelligence will be unaffected by cryostasis, but some of his other skills have been dulled by the huge amount of time spent immobile. His perception and agility have suffered, but after adjusting to the new world, he will soon find himself improving significantly in those areas. The pilot has excelled in his chosen field, turning a passion for flight into a successful career. He knows the complex inner workings of an aircraft, and his intelligence justifies that. Similarly, he has the resilience of body and mind to survive a bitter war in enemy territory. The Commonwealth is nothing compared to the dangerous skies over Shanghai, and as you can see, his endurance represents that as well. But we can talk more about his stats now in the context of his essential perks. From the strength skill tree, we will only need 1 perk, and that is Armorer. All ranks of this will grant you access to all of the Armorer modifications that you need for your power armor. Then we have Perception. As I mentioned before, this will get a lot stronger as he adapts to the new world. The first thing to do here is drop 3 perk points into the base stat. After that, take 3 ranks of the Locksmith perk. The pilot is familiar with fine motor skills, and picking locks is nothing compared to tinkering with aircrafts. With these 3 ranks, you'll be able to infiltrate master locks. The other perk to take from Perception is Demolitions Expert. With all levels of this, your explosives will do double damage, affecting a larger area. On top of this, mines and grenades shot in vats will explode for double damage. Additionally, you can now craft explosives at chem stations, and grenades gain a throwing arc. The pilot will have access to all available intelligence perks, and there are quite a few that will come in very handy for this build. Firstly, 2 ranks of Medic will make Stimpaks and Radaway 60% more effective, 3 ranks of Hacker will grant you access to master terminals, take 2 levels of Gun Nut, as well as all ranks of Science for all the gun and high-tech mods you'll need for the pilot's gear. Then grab the Scrapper perk to gain more materials from salvaging, as well as more rare and uncommon salvage. Next, we have Robotics Expert, and this this will open the door to some fun gameplay possibilities. With all ranks, you can hack robots to power them off, self-destruct them, incite them to attack, or even give them specific commands. And finally, all levels of nuclear physicist. Fusion cores in your power armor will last twice as long, and you can eject fusion cores like devastating grenades. Just like Perception, the pilot's agility will benefit from some exploration throughout the Commonwealth. It's amazing how much a good leg stretch can do. In the agility stat line, invest 2 perk points into the base stat, then take all ranks of commando for double damage on automatic weapons. Your hipfire accuracy will also be improved, and you will have a high chance of staggering your foes. Then take all ranks of action boy. With this perk, your action points will regenerate 75% faster. Finally, drop 1 perk point into the base luck stat, and then all ranks of Scrounger. This will allow you to find much more ammo, and you'll have a chance to restore some ammo when firing the last round of your magazine. With all of this in mind, the pilot's playstyle should be pretty easy to pick up. You will use his array of explosive weapons to rain death upon your foes, preferably from a nice vantage point. Most of the time you'll spray with spray and pray, throw endless grenades, and drop the occasional mini nuke from the safety of your power armor. You can enter combat out of your armor, but most of the time you'll only leave the suit when in the safety of the Pridwin or in the company of Brotherhood members. At the end of the game, with all bobbleheads and perk points but not including gear, the pilot's special stats will be 4 strength, 5 perception, 11 endurance, 2 charisma, 11 intelligence, 5 agility, and 3 luck. As for gear, the pilot will have multiple layers of badass attire as well as a variety of bombastic weapons. He'll wear the bomber jacket, which can be found by following an active vertibird until the former pilot is eventually killed in combat. On top of that, he'll wear the yellow flight helmet. This can be worn a lot of the time, but when in most combat scenarios you want to call upon your T60 power armor, cover all of this in military paint, add a jetpack to the torso, the internal database and standard headlamp to the helmet, and explosive vents on the legs. As for his arsenal, use spray and pray for most situations, fully upgraded with the muzzle brake. You'll get yourself the big boy legendary variant of the Fat Man, and this is for special occasions. But if you want to make it bang without using all of your mini nukes, use some grenades or even eject the power core from your armor. Carry grenades of all kinds. The pilot doesn't discriminate when it comes to explosives. We chose to use Codsworth, fully upgraded as a sentry bot automatron with Gatling lasers and missile launchers as our companion of choice. But if you're not fond of Codsworth's commentary, you can just as easily use a normal automatron. The idea is that the pilot travels with a robot sidekick, but it really doesn't matter who you choose, so long as they're deadly. The pilot will not be dedicating time to settlement building. The Pridwin will serve as his base of operations. And there you have it, guys. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet if you want to see more Fallout 4 builds, and if you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Don't forget that timestamps can be found in the description just below for all of your video navigation needs, along with social media links and all the good stuff. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. My name is Scott, and I look forward to nerding out with you in the next one.